All right, so this is where we're going to start, but just a little bit of a recap from last week. For those who either weren't here or have short-term memory loss, we have, which may be something you want to talk about. We talked last week about why did we choose this season of the church year to talk about death and dying? And the reason for that is because we have some liturgical markers around All Saints' Day, All Souls' Day, All Hallows' Eve, that sort of 3-day window in which the church chooses to honor what's happening in the natural world with the slow and beautiful, but slow death of the leaves and the trees and the bushes, etc. So the church says this would be a good day to talk about the life to come and how we think about that and how we hope for it. The same way in Christmas time, we're in the darkest time of the year, so we celebrate the arrival of the light of Christ. And at Easter, as the world is bursting forth back into bloom, we talk about resurrection and new life. So there's a way in which those things are aligned. We then spent a good long time talking about how you doing this work of planning for your inevitable death is a great gift to be given to your family members and loved ones. And many of you on the other side of that, and either have received that gift with great gratitude, or in the more likely scenario, have not received that gift, and you have lived through the frustration, the agony, really, of trying to sort through all the thousands of decisions that need to be made in the lead up and then in the aftermath of someone's death. So, you guys are here for good reason, and you're here for your loved ones. They can give you that gift back by honoring those wishes, which in large part, I don't know that in 10 plus years of ministry I've had anyone said, well, she wanted this hymn, but I don't want this hymn. Usually it's pretty easy to say, well, she wanted this hymn, so we're doing this hymn, or whatever it may be. So we did. Then we talked about planning your funeral, and maybe sketching out some notes for your obituary, and doing some of the work to make those choices that will then facilitate the service, which honors your particular memory, all right? Then we went ahead and we were going to, but we got a little caught up with good questions, talk a little bit about this conversation guide. Now I'll just back up and say, this comes from the Conversation Project, which is an online resource which has many guides like this. This is just their starter kit one. There's ones that we'll talk about later about how to choose a healthcare proxy, how to be a healthcare proxy, how to make sure you have all those other things attended to as well. This is a really good organization focused a little more on the medical side of things, which is an important side to be focused on. But it's not necessarily going to give you all the spiritual information. It's not necessarily going to give you all the financial and legal information. But it is going to give you a great starting place. So the Conversation Project, if you Google that, you will find this resource and many others in digital form, as well as videos, testimonials, anything that you may find helpful. Now, what I love about this resource is they start from a place of values. They start from a place of what matters to you in your life, not in your death first, but in your life. What are the things that you care about? What are the things that make you happy? What are the things that you want to be supportive of? And then they sort of transition that into, well, how would that inform your choices about your medical care going forward? You guys, don't be shy. Come on in. We don't want you to stand the whole time. Come on forward. For those of you who have looked at this from last week, if you got it, I'm just going to take us through it quickly, because it's in your hands and you can work through it on your own. But it really is like a little workbook, like you're back in school, right? So you've got questions that you're supposed to answer, short answer questions. Thinking about step 1 there on page 3, what matters to you? And so there's a question, what does a good day look like for you? What's a good, happy day? Where you finish the day, you say, that was a good day. What does that mean for you? Who or what supports you during difficult times? Who are the particular people that need to be involved? Or what are the particular practices or comforts or things which ground you and sustain you in this life? All right? Another one, what matters to me? Then you sort of transitioned into what matters to me in my end of life times. So it's starting to that point about what matters to you, what are your values, and it's getting you to think that way, which is different than just saying, well, I want to, so the answer, you get to the answer differently. Let me say it that way. The answer that I want to die at home may be because a great day is sitting on your porch or in your living room reading a book with a cup of coffee, and that brings you great comfort and delight. It may be another reason, but you don't come at it for saying, well, what can I do to make sure I die at home? You say, the reason I want that to happen is because of what matters to me, what my values are. So it starts with that, and then moves into some questions around planning your talk. We talked last week a little bit about how it is, there's two parts to this work. One big part of it is you making these decisions and coming to terms with some of the questions that need to be answered. Then, equally as important, and maybe even more difficult, depending, is communicating those decisions and those wishes to the people who need to know. And that, for a number of reasons, can be really hard. So what they have here are some little questions that as you work through can start to say, okay, this is as a patient, here's what I want, here's who I want to be a part of these conversations, and then if you turn all the way to page, let's say step 3, they're saying, then you start talking. You need to schedule a time to do this. Many of us will say, I'm just going to do it when it feels right. When it just happens that the right people are around the right table and we've had the right amount to drink and we're at the right or it's like the coffee after the meal or something, and the stars align, and this is the moment where I will say, I want to talk to you about my death. And they will not run in the other direction. They will say, yes, now is the time that we should have this conversation. That may happen, and you can give great thanks if that happens. In all likelihood, it will probably not happen that way, and it will be a good excuse not to have this conversation. So what you need to do is say, okay, who are the people who I need to have this conversation with, and then how do I approach them about that? So they even have some little wording, some language that you can use to say, look, there's something important I think we need to talk about. Hopefully you're not waiting to also say, I've received a terminal diagnosis and therefore we should have this conversation. You're saying, look, my priest said I needed to do this, or some other reason, and I'm happy to be blamed for most everything. But something to sort of get you going and hopefully opening up that space to talk about some touchy things, some sensitive things. And what essentially, because you're talking about what really matters to you, and you're asking your loved ones to also confront with you the fact of your mortality. But that's a really important step to this. And if you've had those conversations already, good on you. You may want to revisit some of those conversations from time to time because your wishes may have changed. Your way you evaluate things may have changed. If you fill this out at 30, it'll be different than if you fill it out at 80. Our perception of life, our engagement with life changes. So that's a really important part of this as well. Then, again, they sort of have the tips for your talk, some little tips to give you to get you talking. And then step 4 is keep talking, right? As I just said, sort of have this conversation, not every day, then you would really not be a lot of fun. But have it, once a year, once every couple of years, with those people who need to be in the loop, so to speak. So do you get what I'm saying about the two parts of this whole thing? One is making these decisions, and one of them is communicating these decisions. And we as the church would also love to have this stuff on file. Now, we get questions sometimes, and we'll talk about this in a minute. We get questions when people feel that it is the right thing for them. Would you be my healthcare proxy? Would you be my executor on my will or trust? And I say this before anybody might ask us, no. Not because we don't care about you, not because we don't love you, and not because we won't be there for you and your loved ones through this end of life time, but because that's just not a sort of right and proper use of not just the priestly role, but also for you having us in those situations is just not quite right. And we can talk, if you have issue with that, we can talk about what some of those reasons are later, but it does get complicated. But we want you to be then thinking about, and we will then say, who else can we help you talk to? Who else can we help you choose in that regard? Any questions about the conversation itself? Because then we're going to dive in a second into some of the more detailed stuff in a minute here. But anyway, yeah, go ahead, Maria.
I just had an idea. I talked to my daughter the other day, and I started like, hey, I know I'm not going to die until I'm 100.
Yes, right.
But I want to talk to you about some things.
Yeah.
And she said, okay.
Good.
And so that's how I started.
That's good. Using some humor. That's why we call this thing Grave Matters, right? We want to lighten it up a little bit. But humor's a great way to say it. I know I'm going to be 1,000 years old or 100 years old when this all comes to pass. But when that day comes, here's some things that matter to me. Open it up like that. That's a beautiful way to do it. Tim, yeah.
So one of my friends, more senior, has a nice daughter, and he was talking about this, and he's not going to involve his daughter at all, but he's going to use his law firm because he doesn't want her to have any issues, and using a separate entity, totally objective, and someone he's going to pay for to take care of his situation.
And in some instances, that makes a lot of sense. There will be, not in every situation, but in many situations, there'll be some really hard decisions to make. And some of you, I know, looking around this room, are in that right now and have lived that. Decisions that may be really hard to make, not just because they're complicated, but because of your emotional investment in the relationship with the person who you are deciding for. So that's, if it makes more sense to have an impartial third party, and if you write out your wishes very clearly, they will be able, maybe not to be able to honor those better, but it may be easier for them to honor those wishes. So yeah, that's not unheard of, Tim. I think that's not a bad point to bring up. Yeah, Chris.
What if you don't have, I don't have anybody that, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Could help me do it, my niece is there, like, have something with it, you know, they're not gonna get involved, and I don't really want her to be, you know? And, Ricky, when Ricky died, I had no money, the government gave me $250. The crematory thing was like over $8,000.
Right.
One member gave me like 100 and 1,000.
Yeah.
They gave me $1,800.
Yeah.
So I like 7 or 8. I don't know who paid it.
So.
I said, I don't know about myself. What's going to happen to me? I don't know.
So, but that's a fair question. These things become expensive. End-of-life medical care becomes expensive. Actual funerals can be expensive, depending on who you're working with and what your choices are for your burials. So here's a couple of things. One, to your first question, if you don't have any immediate family around, it may be time to talk to some friends, or you can talk to a lawyer who would say, you know, would you serve as this in my, you know, for me? Would you be a healthcare proxy or, you know, help manage these affairs? Well, that's the other question. If money is an issue around these various choices and decisions, that is one of the reasons that the church has discretionary funds to be able to help parishioners at that time of life. And we have on multiple occasions given discounts or given, you know, free funerals, so to speak, if it was a real need on behalf of the individual. So if that happens, Chris, we are here for you in that regard. All right? And that's worth noting, to say, I'm not sure I will have the funds to pay for this, and that just alerts us to say that. And this is all confidential information. This is kept on file and under lock and key here at the church. So in our regard, we would be ready.
It's not that I don't want to work for it or whatever. It's that I'm able, I'm totally disabled.
Yeah.
According to the government. And,
We hear you, and we're here for you. All right? You got me? Yeah, Tom.
Have you all, or has the church, Christ of St. Luke's, set up a situation or a process by which we can prepay the church and make sure that the church is paid for and that's where it's going to be?
Yeah. So as far as funerals and funeral services, or for columbarium reserving, or even the in-ground burial option we talked about, yes, you can prepay those, and the motivation there is the prices are probably going to go up over time, not down. So if you pay them now, you're paying today's prices, not the future prices, and we've seen that with the cost of like bronze, and just even the plaques themselves have gone up, and the people who got in and got paid earlier on paid that rate, and they're not paying the going rate, so to speak. You can lock in the savings right now if you want to do that. So I hand out a few more things, and I tried to make enough copies, but as is happening every day around here, we have too many people. So we have here, let me talk for a second about healthcare proxies, and then I'll actually hand these out. So the Conversation Project has some really important and good information about choosing a healthcare proxy. So thinking specifically about medical issues now. You should look at those materials and see if they can be helpful, but this is something that you will be not required, but strongly encouraged to have as a part of your affairs, so to speak, legal, financial, and medical. Think about first what your wishes are for your end-of-life medical care. Having worked as a chaplain, as all priests do in their training, the medical system is set up for you to say stop, not for them to say stop. Does that make sense? So you're going to have to, the more thinking you can do about intubation, resuscitation, quality of life, that you sort of think, this is enough for me. You have to be the one to say enough. Now, if you have a good medical team, they will raise the question, and they will say, I think this is what it should be, but if you ask for it, we're going to do it, until the point where they feel like they're causing harm to the individual. And that's a pretty high threshold, though, with the amount of medical science there is right now. Frank?
One of the things that I heard, and I believe it to be true, is that if you're in a crisis situation and you've done all of the advanced medical directives, they need to be put on a refrigerator where it's easily accessible and they can be seen immediately. Otherwise, the EMTs will be forced to do prolongation, whether that was your wish or not.
That is true. Unless they think otherwise, they're going to try to keep you alive. And there are some reasons that, and there are many reasons they have to do that, but there are reasons that you need to have that clearly distinguished also in your file, like in your medical file. It should also be on file for that, which is good. Ginny, and then I want to keep us rolling. Yeah.
You can upload all those documents to like the Sinclair website so that wherever you end up, in an emergency, they've already got it in the file.
And where you don't want to be making those choices is when you're actually thinking about intubating or resuscitating someone in that moment. Because usually they'll do it, and then you'll be like, oh, shoot. This was not only not their wishes, but I've had people come, they say, like, what have we done? Like, this is now we're into a whole nother world that we never really wanted to get into. And then questions about, hospice care, palliative care, what kind of drugs or narcotics you're willing to use versus not. Questions about dying in the hospital versus dying at home. If we were to, and the last time when we had 3 weeks for this class a few years ago, we did do this. We asked you to turn to the person next to you and say, if you could plan it, not that you would plan it, but if you could plan it, how would you die? And most people, almost always, at home, surrounded by loved ones, and that's the dream. The reality rarely meets that dream. But if you set out your wishes, you have a better chance, at least, of ending up that way. Okay? So those are the kind of, but you want to pick a person who understands what matters to you and who you believe will follow through with those wishes. And that may not be a child or a spouse. It may be too much to ask of them to be the one to say, yes, we need to pull the plug on this person at this time. Or we're not going for another round of chemo, or something like that. All right? Questions about healthcare proxies specifically before I hand out some of the other materials here. All right. Stephen Taylor, who some of you know, is a member of our parish, former junior warden, member of the vestry, also works as a trusts and estates lawyer. He was kind enough to provide me with some of the basic stuff they hand out to their folks that we can then, actually take one and pass it along, Went, just send it all around. One per couple, please, just because I think we're going to stretch it. And we can make more of these copies and have them available, but this is just basic information that hopefully will be repetitive to you if you've talked about this with folks, and is still important to have on file. So the first one is just some basic vocabulary and terms that we hope everybody is familiar with. The second one, here we go, Went, is a little packet that really lays it all out there. And so this is who should be notified, and how should they This is your own personal information, some of your biography, the handling of your remains. Do you want to be, here we can send this one around too. Do you want to be cremated, casket? A little bit about the service, but we gave a little bit more information about that. And ultimately, some questions about costs and expenses and how those are going to be paid for, to your point, Crystal. So this is something to be filled out and held on to or made copies of, but this sort of lays it all out in one document here that we hope will be helpful as well. It makes sense. There are people who are here to help you with this kind of stuff. So if you can afford it, and if you are able to engage a legal professional to just help you through some of this stuff, it is highly recommended. You certainly don't need to use Stephen and his firm, but they do work with some of our folks. But there are a number of folks around town that you can use to have this, make this happen. So that is all part of it. So we should have a little packet and then just a one-page, double-sided estate planning basics kind of thing. Now, a lot of people think, I don't have an estate. I have a house, I have a car, I have some bank accounts, but I don't have an estate, right? That this work is for like super rich people. Not true. Not true in the sense of the vast majority of us own possessions. We may own a home, or we may be almost owning a home that we're still paying off the mortgage on. And in that sense, you have things that need to be attended to in your afterlife. You can't take it with you, right? This is, again, talking now about some of the sort of the legal stuff will help you facilitate this, but talking about the sort of financial piece of this, your assets, so to speak. This is another place where what matters to you, what you value, is also important to have been thinking about. So there are ways in which these funds are utilized in your medical care. There are ways in which they can be dispersed to loved ones, whether as a possession, like you get the car, or the car is to be sold and the proceeds are to go to this person. All of that matters and is helpful, and there's all this sort of drama of like sort of the will, right? The reading of the will, and who gets all the money, and who's getting the pearls, and who's getting the diamonds, and all that stuff. It's been romanticized to a place that's maybe not so helpful. The reality is it's usually pretty dull. Don't tell Stephen I said that. If you are clear with what you value, who you value, what organizations you may want to support, that is, as clear as you can make that, that is helpful. Okay? Now, another thing I'm going to be sending around is again, two-sided fiduciary appointments for estate planning documents. So this is for you all to be taking out and filling out as well, and this has the executor of your will and your trust, if you have a trust, a revocable trust or not, a general durable power of attorney to make some legal decisions on your behalf, just like you have someone who is your healthcare proxy to make some medical decisions on your behalf. So it doesn't have to be an episode of Succession here, the HBO show, if you've watched that, right? It can be a part of this. And I know in our family, we have had this conversation with our parents, and they've said, okay, Noah, I want you to handle this part of things. And Nick, my brother, I want you to handle this part of things. And so this is what we're thinking about, how this will all go. But they have worked with someone, and yes, paid a small fee, but really just created this document, this will, to be able to make sure that all these questions are answered. Okay? So, lawyers in the room, is there anything more I need to say about that as far as what people should be thinking about, other than putting in a plug for using a lawyer? Yeah, Philip.
One small thing, if you didn't know, power of attorney ceases at death.
So you need you do need a succession plan on that to sort of, this person that predeceases you, there needs to be another person.
And I'm not an attorney, but I was a banker.
Okay, fair enough. Other questions about, so here's a lot of documentation for you to take and use at home. If you need help filling this out, you can ask us, but we may certainly put you out to some other folks. And I know some of you have worked on this in the past. This is meant to be helpful. It's not meant to be confusing. So if there's anything that's confusing, let me know, and I may or may not be able to answer it. But is this, having these documents at least sort of set you on a path? Is this a little bit helpful to be thinking this way? All right, good. Yes, Chris?
Have the first paper you were passing out,
Yeah, the estate basics one?
the one with the colorful picture.
Oh, yeah, sure. I got an extra one of those. There you go, Chris. Other questions about legal financial? So let me talk for a second.
At some point, this
Yes.
will be on the website?
Yes, I will need to get, so Stephen has stripped these of the Austin Taylor logos. I don't know if he's willing to let us sort of just put these up there for everyone to use. But some of these, the Conversation Project stuff we can link to, our funeral documents we'll certainly link to, and I'll check with him to see how much of this information we can repackage, so to speak, under our own name. But, so I don't want to promise you without talking to him first. But he was willing to let us hand these out. It is. Yeah, exactly. To sort of forward along and share. Then, once you've filled it out, have on file, in wherever it is you keep your files of things, in your house, and someplace easily accessible, where you remember and know where it is. And then, if you're working with a law firm or the bank or various things, they should have files of these as well as the church. We're happy to hold on to all of this if you have a little packet of it as well. Other questions about planning legally and financially? So, yes, Ann.
Noah, were you going to discuss lists of requests?
Yes.
Okay.
Bill?
One of the documents that should be with your file is your list of your passwords.
Yes, I was going to bring that up. Yes. So in this day and age, one of the most torturous things is when someone dies and their kids have to figure out their way into their computer or their iPad or their phone even. So if you have a list of your passwords, you probably already need one. Although it's a little trickier now because you have a lot of the stuff is auto-remembered, right? If you go in and you sort of log into a website you've been in before where you have a username and password, it sort of auto-populates, which is wonderful and also a little challenging if you can't get to the, if you can't even open the iPhone or you can't get onto the desktop computer. So yes, a list of passwords also easily and readily accessible for folks when they're going through your things. Yes, Rob.
If people have joint bank accounts and they use those bank accounts to make automatic payments like for their power bill, they should talk to their bank about what would happen if one of the two parties dies.
Great point. So automatic payments coming out of joint bank accounts, which all of a sudden get renegotiated in one of the partners' death, or even your own sort of bank account information for if you're an individual, so that your family or whoever the person who is managing those affairs can have access to them as well. So the bank should help them out if they're listed as such. But yeah, when you got to log in to the online banking or your ATM PIN or something like that, that kind of information should be not publicly visible and available, but in a place where if you're able to get into the files, you would be able to find them. So yeah, that in this digital age is a very important thing as well. Yeah.
And also work with the funeral home in advance and prepay, choose your casket, give them all the notes and they have it compiled.
That's right.
It's all done.
The work of making these decisions once you've made them is really hard, but it does help in pretty much every area as long as you communicate it out. And it does make it makes everything flow easier, faster, and more just better in all those fronts. And that's true with the funeral homes too. So, to Ann's question about lists of bequests, going back to this question of what matters to you or what has mattered to you in your life, this is a chance for you to make some financial disbursements to those organizations. And that is a great gift, whether it's $5 or $5 million that you might be leaving. Because what it says is this place was important to me. This place, institution was important to me. And I have what I have to give, and I would like to make sure this place knows that they meant something to me in my life, and I'm going to try to honor that in my death as well. This is true also with people. So the majority of bequests and stuff go to family members, just in sort of, if you look at the number of them, they go to, and it's, usually proportional to how close or how far the person is immediately related, although there are some exceptions to that rule. But that's part of what you will be doing if you sat down and said, my assets upon my death, are first, they might all go to the spouse to do that, and upon theirs, I want some of it to go to those folks. Or you have worked together with your spouse to say, okay, if I die first, you get everything, but then once you die, it's going to go this way and sort of be passed down and out. Now, I'm going to give you a couple more documents which have to do with making a planned gift to the church. One of the most helpful things you can do for a church that has meant something to you is to remember your church in your will. We have we have a pretty good size, but could be bigger, planned giving society called the Heath Light Society. And all you need to do is have given $1 to the church in your will or in your affairs, and you are a member of that society. There is no threshold to buy in that regard. Now, we only know if you tell us. So some of you may be thinking, I've done that, so I should be on their list. And maybe you are, maybe you aren't, because maybe you've communicated that, maybe you haven't. But here is a little letter that if you want to remember Christ and St. Luke's in your estate, you can fill out and return to us. And this is something we keep on file, and this is sort of how we register. You don't need to tell us an amount, because usually it's not a set amount, because there are other expenses that come along the way. And then there's one last document here, which is just some of the, again, this is vocabulary. Sorry, I'll give you the whole thing. Vocabulary to help you distinguish and be sort of informed about a bequest versus an endowment versus a disbursement from an IRA versus these various things. So we have policies inside the church for how we handle planned gifts or bequests. It's mostly at the discretion, not the discretion, it's mostly at the decision of the vestry as to whether a gift is going to be endowed, and what that means is that that money is kept and invested, and then it is the interest from that is what feeds into either the operating budget or some other part of the church's financial needs. So we have a trust that has underneath it a number of different endowments. Some of them are restricted, meaning they have a direct purpose that has been expressly and legally it's binding, and some of them are not. And so the church then gets to decide where its greatest need is on that front. We have a great team of financial trustees who manage that and oversee the investment of that, and we are always evaluating how to do that best and better. But our general rule, if you want to create an endowment, is that we pull 4% off of the interest. So if you gave an endowment of, say, $100,000, you'd be pulling out $4,000 a year. That's one of the ways to do it. And the calculation, I know Sigur's here, so I'm going to be accurate. The calculation is 4% based off of what they call a rolling 12-quarter average, meaning over the last 3 years, 4% off that, which keeps us growing slowly in terms of how much we can pull out, but keeps us from really bottoming out if there's been a few months or a quarter or a year where the stock market is going whoop. And we've seen that in the last few years. Up, down, side to side, every which way. So that's how we try to protect against that as well. Endowments are great gifts, but they require a sizable contribution in order to spin off, so to speak, a meaningful amount that will be able to be used going forward. So $100 is going to give you 4 cents, right? And so we probably wouldn't use $100 as an endowment. Now, What we can use other things for is things that are called funds. And this is money that will be gone and it will be put into a fund and then used, but it won't stay forever. So if you want it to stay forever, you have to think about the amount that you're willing to commit and just know that it's going to be 4% of that number, not the whole number. But if you want to give that $100,000 and say, I want this to be spent in such a way that it augments the church's efforts or, for outreach or something like that over the next 5 years, then all of a sudden we've got money we can spend. But we have to manage those differently than we manage endowments. There's also the question of restricted versus unrestricted. Candidly, it's easier for the church if the gift is unrestricted. And that allows us then to, if you trust your vestry and trust your finance committee, and you know those people, and they're available if you have questions, to determine what the greatest need is for the church. To use it as a fund that supplements a certain ministry that we're trying to get off the ground for a few years or something, and then get to cruising altitude, so to speak, and then we can run it. Or to say, you know what, we really need to take the pressure off the operating budget, so we're going to create endowments that help alleviate some of the pressure so that we don't have to raise 95% of our funds every year and cause everybody great anxiety about whether we're going to do that or not. So it helps us be able to have some more stability to plan for the future. So that's some of the different ways in which gifts to the church can be used. If there are things that you cared about or that mattered to you, you can certainly list those, and we attempt to honor them without restricting your gift at the same time. So you can say music and caring for creation and the adult formation were all really important to me. And we have an appendix to this trust which says this is the gift from this person, this is why they give it, this is what they cared about. But at the end of that sentence, you say this is meant merely as, not merely, but this is meant to guide but not determine, or there's some legalese you can put in there that says this is not restricted to this. Some people feel strongly it needs to be restricted, and if you do, we can talk about that, but that means we may have plenty of money in one area that we can use and not enough in other areas. So it kind of gets us a little bit out of balance. So we're trying to create a financial picture where we have endowments, annual pledges, an operating budget, extra funds we can use for capital expenses, which may pop up from time to time. So we're trying to have a full picture that we can attend to. And you trusting us to make some of those decisions is a great gift, and we appreciate that trust, and we will honor it as best we can in terms of promoting the life and flourishing of this parish. Any questions about planned gifts, or in general, or to the church itself? Yes, Ed.
What is the minimum amount right now? Would you say that the substitute endowment would be enough?
I would say, we don't have a minimum amount, but I would say if it's going to be, I think our actual number is if it's less than $50,000, we will seek to use it as a fund. If it's more than that, if it's between 50 and 100, we'll think about it. But 100 is kind of a number that would allow you to say, look, this is $4,000 that are coming to the church every year forever. And maybe a little bit more than 4, because hopefully that money keeps growing over time. We kind of use that because our average pledge is $4,000. If you want to think about it this way, some people do, they say, could I endow my pledge? Because we're seeing that this year, we have some people die, and they're not pledging anymore, and so we need to replenish that year over year with either new pledges or increases from the current congregation. So if you think to yourself, I want to be able to endow my pledge, then you can think, well, if I give $4,000 a year, I would need to give about $100 for that to happen, which may not be possible, and we're not saying you need to do that, but just as far as a calculation, that might be helpful. Bill?
The church's policy on people giving assets,
Yeah.
non-financial.
Yes. We'll take it. We'll take it if it's meant to be sort of sold or distributed. We don't want a parking lot full of your old cars. Does that make sense? So if you say like either the estate is going to sell the car and then give the money to the church, or the church takes ownership of the car and then sells it and then keeps the proceeds. But I mean, like, I'm trying to sound pejorative, but like old couches, old bed frames. I mean, no, we get a lot of offers from, from people who are downsizing, who are doing things to say, would you like this? And we just don't have the space. And it doesn't necessarily, we aren't necessarily the right place to deposit some of that stuff. But if you wanted to say, I leave the house to the church in the expectation that, I mean, maybe they could use it as a clergy housing or something like that if they wanted. Or with the instructions to say they are to handle the selling of that house and then keep the proceeds. That's something that we will accept, and we have in the past. Some of you know that we had a parishioner die a few years ago who left us farmland in North Dakota. And we have, over the last few years, been working hard to take possession of and then sell that farmland, and then we keep the proceeds on that. And that was a very generous gift, has proven to be a very generous gift. So yes, we can take that as well. Sigrid.
So if your mom for a named endowment is $100,000, is it possible to say upfront, I want an endowment, I will give you a minimum of $25,000 per year that would raise $100,000 in 4 years, or do you need that whole chunk at once?
That's a good question. I hadn't thought about that. I think we would be willing to build up to it if that's where we're ultimately headed. And so we'd be willing to work with you on that if it's said over the course of some time, either in the lead up, and this doesn't necessarily need to be done only at death. It can be done while you're living. I think we'd be willing to. I don't know. You tell me. Do you think that's okay? You're in charge. You're a real estate. You're our financial trustee. Is that sound business? Yeah. I think it makes perfect sense as well. I don't want to overemphasize the endowments and say this is the only way to give to the church, the only way to do this. I mean, that's one of the ways, but other forms of bequest where you say, like, this is the kind of thing, again, it's about showing your family, showing others, and showing the church what it meant to you in your life, as in taking care of them in a sense when you pass on. And so I don't want to say, if you don't have $100,000, don't bother. That's not what I'm saying. I don't want you to hear that. But I'm saying as an endowment functions, you have to think about there's fees for the management of it and things like that. So if it gets too low, it actually becomes negative rather than positive if you manage it that way. You see what I'm saying? So we're trying to think about there's multiple ways to give a bequest to the church, and one of those is endowment, other ones are funds, other ones are just a gift that we can utilize. Yes, Phil.
Does the church have a general endowment fund to which anybody could contribute any amount?
We do. We do have one that it's a named fund, so it's not a sort of, it's under Carl's name, which we've created, and that feeds into the operating budget. So that's the general one. We have other funds that are also named that are restricted to a certain amount. You would need to say, I want my money to go into that specific one as well. But if you wanted to just say, I'd like this to go to the general endowment of the church, we do have some funds that are available for that. So that can happen as well. Yeah.
Speaking of strictly material items.
Yeah.
Okay, and this is back to the bequest thing.
Yeah.
If you have family pieces, or like piano, long case clock, china, crystal, silver, anything, wills and estates typically don't deal with those unless you want to fund your attorney's next trip to Jamaica. So you need to list them, the name of the recipient, contact information for that person, and if you want, a little bit of provenance. Okay? And make sure that you give that to your attorney or whoever's going to be your executor.
And you can get those things appraised through an antiques dealer or something like that. You can have someone go through your finer goods, so to speak, and say this is valuable, this isn't. This would be an emotional gift, or this would be a financial gift of some kind. It's like Antiques Roadshow at your house.
Right. Yeah. But this causes more dissonance among heirs than just about anything else.
I think that's fair. Yeah, and I know you know that from experience and work experience. Yeah, not just your own. Other things, other questions, other concerns about all this. So this is a lot of information. What we're trying to do is equip you to do this work. If and when you want to talk to a priest about this, if you're having trouble with your own ideas about just breaking through the reality of our mortality, we can sit down and talk together about it. We are not the ones who will be able to execute all these things like make a will for you, make a trust, and even set up a financial giving situation. But we can try to help point you in the right direction and talk with you through some of the finer details of just how we think about these things as well. Any final questions? Next week, the bishop is visiting, so we'll have a little forum here, a little talk-back conversation with her. It is Confirmation Sunday, which will be lovely. We've got 25 folks getting confirmed. Some of you are sitting right here, so we've got a great crew for that. So come and support those folks, and you'll have 45 minutes or so with the bishop from 9:15 to 10. And then the week after that, our friends from Tidewater Friends of Foster Care are going to come and tell us a little bit about their organization, so we know more about them and have a better relationship than just providing presence on a yearly basis. So that's the next couple of weeks. Thank you guys for all your attention and time for this. Thank you.